Alright, how's it going? This is Sam Wilker with thinkparticle.com, and in this video today, we're going to be working with splines. So, what I've got here is just a setup of 3 different splines I've made to show you an example of how this works. These are different splines, as you can see. We have this helix right here. We have this curve here and here. And if we jump out of our camera, you can actually see that those bend differently. Oops, let's get back into the studio setup. So we've got a bunch of different material types too. We have specular and glossy materials in Octane, so just having some fun with them. Oops, I've moved my camera. The actual camera. Shouldn't have done that. There we go. Okay. Anyways, regardless, cameras don't matter right now. Alright, so what's going on here? You'll notice this helix might look a little bit different than a normal helix. It's because it's not actually a helix. Well, technically it is, but it's actually a straightened out helix. And what we're doing is we're going to be doing something fun today. We're going to control this helix, and we're going to use it, or we're going to do it using Xpresso. And this is a cosine wave, and this is a sine wave, and this is another curve that I'm using to crunch the helix up. So look at that. That's pretty cool. And kind of weird, actually. I really like it. And now we have a pretzel. It's great. Anyways, then you can just kind of reset it and straighten it all out. Anyways, what we're going to do today is explore how this works. And you can stretch things, you can flatten them. So you'll notice that this is now a little bit more of a crushed helix, which is cool. Anyways, it gives you a little bit more flexibility than a helix in that form. And in the other ones, you'll notice that this is actually not just like a helix. This is quite different. You can change any curve you want. You can form these splines. This bottom one is now moving. You can design just about any shape with these splines. These are great for animation curves, for anything you can think of that uses a spline. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this using Xpresso. We're going to build this rig right here. Also, if you don't have time to do that, it's free available in the links below. I'm going to give this one away. It will just be this rig right here, but I figured I'd say thanks for all of the wonderful support. I've been working really hard and released a number of products lately. I think my latest 2 were the Octane Studio Kit and the Building Generator. And I've just had some amazing support, and I really wanted to say thank you. So what I'm going to do is give away this rig, and I think it's pretty cool. If you want to learn more about the kits that sponsor it, by the way, all these free training, or all the free training and products, check out the Octane Studio Kit on thinkparticle.com and the Building Generator as well. There's a lot of really cool updates coming to each of them. Anyways, that's enough of me talking about those things. Let's go ahead and build this. So what we're going to do is stop rendering and go into a new scene. So the first thing we need to do is just get a straight spline, and the easiest way to do that is to actually use a helix. So we're going to give it about 15 points. It doesn't matter how many points particularly. It does need enough points. You could do 100, you could do 10. Actually, let's go back. Let's do 100. That'll be a good example because I've done edits before with splines in Xpresso, and it was a lot harder to work with them that way than it is this way. So we'll call this, and this will show you that you don't have to work with each particular point. This is pretty cool. Anyways, TP spline, we'll call it that. We'll just call it the Think Particle Spline. Okay. We're going to make an Xpresso tag and drag it up. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is drag in the TP spline and the spline. Actually, we'll leave the spline object out. We're going to make some user data. We're going to start by making a new group. If you haven't worked with Xpresso before, I have some old training that still applies 100% on my blog to go learn about Xpresso. We're going to start with our first data type, and this is going to be called spline. So we're going to create a new data type, call it spline, and change the data type to a link. Okay. We're going to make a new group and call this multipliers. We'll turn off the title bar, and we're going to call this XPOS multiply. And then we're going to change it to a real and add a few extra zeros to this section, then make a negative version in the minimum section. Actually, technically, I guess we should just turn off the minimum and maximum. We're going to copy that and paste it twice. Then we're going to change the second to Y and the third to Z. The next thing we're going to do is create another group, and this is going to be called Splines. We're going to create a new data type in there and just set it as spline. We're going to reset it and set the point types to easy ease and kind of pull them in a bit. And this will be the X spline. Oops, hit enter. Don't do that too soon. It'll be okay. And then we're going to have our Y spline. I'm actually going to just zero this out for the X spline default. The Y spline is going to stay like that. And then the Z spline, oops, is going to just be reset. So it's just going to be a straight curve like that. So this is going to go from point A to point B just straight without any edits. I'll show you how that works later. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have everything we want. We're going to select all of our data types and reset them to default. Drag our spline into the spline. Now we'll start editing. The first thing we're going to do is drag in all these data types into our object here. The X spline, the Y spline, and the Z spline. So the next thing we're going to do is start by grabbing some data types. So we're going to need a few. We're going to need a point data type. We're going to start by taking the point data type and grabbing the object and connecting it. And let's grab the rest of the data types we're going to need. We're going to need a math add node, a range mapper node, and an iterator, or an iteration. So how this works is the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that spline. So ignore all these other data points. Right now we're taking the object of the spline and dragging it into this point node right here. And in there, we have a few things we can do. We can find the point position, the point normal or direction, and the point count. And we can also grab the point index and point position and control those. We're just going to start by taking the point count and setting that to the end of the iteration. And the next thing we're going to do is grab the range mapper and set the input upper and the spline type to be inputs by clicking on this blue box right here. So we're going to go ahead and drop down to input upper and spline because we're going to control those. So the input upper is going to be the point count, and the iteration is going to be the point, or the input. And what that's going to do is allow us to control with the range mapper using the spline from the X spline, or the Y spline, or the Z spline, to control the actual position of that spline. So let's go ahead and drag in the TP spline as well. We're going to go to the actually, nope, we're going to grab a point node. And we're going to full screen this with Control Tab and drag that over. That spline needs to connect to that object. And we're going to need the point index and point position. The point index is going to be controlled by the iteration. So iteration is going to go through each point. So we're going to control the amount of points. In this case, there's 100 points. And it's going to go through each of the points, all 100 points. Then it's going to range map their positions using this technique right here, which we're going to use here. And then we're going to put that into the actual point position. We're going to need a reals to vector node as well. And I have a little bit of Xpresso OCD lining up these lines, so that takes a little bit sometimes. What we're going to do is do a math multiply node. We're going to change the math add node to a multiply node from the function in the parameters, or in the node settings. We're going to take the X position multiply and drag that into the math multiply. And we're going to duplicate this whole setup here that we're using right here. twice, and we're going to set it up the exact same way. The input is going to be the iterator, and the input upper is going to be the point count, and then the splines are going to be controlled by the respective splines that we have in our user data. Oops, and accidentally deleted the Z position multiply by double-clicking on it while it was empty, which you don't want to do. Anyways, we're going to take all of those and multiply them and then connect them, and now you can see that we already have our spline. So technically, this is great for graphing as well. So if you need to graph it, if you need to graph anything, you can use this sort of setup. You can have some fun by changing the Z spline points and the Y spline points, and what that'll do is if we make the spline editable, you can actually see that the points spread further out up here than they do down here. Another thing we're going to need to do is change the spline type from Bezier to a B-spline, a linear, cubic, Kima. Any of those will work, just not B-spline, or excuse me, not Bezier. So I'll use B-spline. So we can use a really extreme example here, and you can really push this, and you can see that the points are really compressed in these corners. That is how the Z-spline works. Oops. And we can also select all those points again and change it to easy ease, and then just really compress the points again in this form. And grab it again, and you can see that in the center they're less compressed now. So if you need to control a spline and you need it to be straight, one thing you can do is copy this curve and paste it, and it'll actually be a perfect spline, but it'll compress the points, which is really cool. That may be really handy for a particular rig. Say you need to have more points for detail over here than over here, depending on different things you're working with. Anyways, so there's a few things. Let's go ahead and start doing some edits and start moving things around. We're just going to reset this, and yeah, let's go ahead and use the spline presets down here. So you can go to these. Let's reset all of these. So right now we have this curve, this horizontal curve going in the positive Y, X, and Z axis. Also, we have our multipliers. So what we can do is, really quick, if I want to make my spline longer in the Z axis, I can control it this way, or the Y axis, or the X axis, and that's fun. So let's go ahead and reset all these. We're going to start by setting the spline presets. We could use a sine in the X axis and a cosine in the Y axis, and that works. It gives us a bit of a helix here. It has a little bit of a jitter down there. But what we're going to do instead is use some custom functions. So what we're going to do is use this right here. It's going to be sine times, or sine multiplied by x, or the sine function of x times pi, which we're going to actually use some more parentheses in here and multiply pi by another number, and that's going to be 5 in this case. We're going to set it to 15 control points and copy that. And then we're going to do the same thing up here in the x-axis and set it to 15 control points, but the difference here is it's going to be cosine instead of sine, and voila, there's your helix. And now we can go back to the point types in the z-axis, set them to easy ease, and pull it together, and now we have a radial bias, or a helix bias, and that is something that can be controlled just by these splines right here. So you can get these really interesting curves set up very quickly, and all you have to do is just understand either a little bit of math or just kind of wing it. And you have so many different points of control here. It's really fun to use, and that's how you set it up. So we're going to go through one more time, and we're going to go ahead and clean up the X manager, or the X group manager. So and that helps with iteration. That helps make it move faster. Oops, we're gonna grab this, do it again. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting these nodes, and then I'm saying to the computer, I want you to first check the TP spline node, then the point node, then the iteration node. Then you can go through the range mappers and then the multipliers. And once you've done all of that, then you can put that all into the Rails to vector adapter, which is going to take this floating point number, which is this number right here. So it's anything that can be a decimal point. So like 100.5, 100, things like that. And then it'll turn it into a vector, which is what's used for a position. So that's an XYZ coordinate. So that's how that works. So it's going to take the X, Y, and Z and convert it into XYZ for the position. So instead of having 3 separate points of data, it's going to have 1 point of data that holds all of it. Then we're going to put that in the point node, and it's going to control that object, which we are controlling from the data right here. And we're using the splines to control the positions of the points, and using the multiply data from these multipliers to control the actual distance of these control points. So if we wanted to, we could actually go in and just, let's see, set this to 100. Okay, so we can check, and actually, as you look at it right now, you can notice that this box is now 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. And if I move it on the z-axis 50 centimeters and center it, you can see that this spline is also perfectly 100 centimeters. So this is actually a data type. Right here, all of these are set to reals. We can set these to meters as well, or centimeters in my case. And then you'll notice that that's 1 meter, and this is now perfectly measurable as well. It's constant. Now, one thing you'll have to keep in mind is that when you use these curves, what you have to do is understand that, these are going to go above and below 0. So as you notice, I tried to move it up, and what it does is it uses the curves, and it gives it this jittery feel, which actually looks kind of cool. It gives it this kind of random feel. But another thing you could try and do is we could try and look at this and see if we can multiply all of it times 0.5. And then select everything and just move it up. Let's see. Yeah, actually what we'll do is we'll set it to times 0.5 plus 0.5. And then we'll do the same thing here. And it'll be times 0.5 plus 0.5. And there you go. And now, you know what? That needs to be a sine, not a cosine. And there you go. Now it is perfectly measurable. 100% would fit within that cube. And that is just a little edit we did, and voila. So we can frame it back up to the minimum and maximum values of the spline. We can hit save, and now you know how to work with the range mapper in that way. Range mapper is probably my #1 node. It's really helpful for some really cool things. And you can do so many different things with a range mapper and splines and things like that. It's very powerful. I love controlling things with time, with splines, things like that. So anyways, there you go. That's how you work with the range mapper node to control splines and get these really cool helixes or other sorts of shapes, all custom controlled by our splines. So let's go ahead and just finish up by designing something a little bit kind of cool. So, oops, we're behind the softbox now. One thing we can do is just, if you use the Octane Studio Kit, you can actually just turn off the camera visibility, and also the in-viewport view, and you will notice that as it renders, you can go behind the softbox and the light is there, but it doesn't get in the way, so it's handy. So let's go ahead and turn this spline into something interesting. Custom, let's just paste that, see what happens. Actually, let's set it to custom times 0.5 plus 0.5. That didn't work. Well, anyways, we'll use that for now. And we will grab these point types and set them to easy ease. And kind of create this pinching shape. Oops. There we go. Let's reframe that. And then we're going to solve part of the problem that we're running into with the collision here by reframing the spline. Now we have this interesting little knot here. And there's just a lot of things you can do. So it may not be the best way to handle splines in every scenario, but it is certainly a very helpful way to control splines in a rig. And that is something to just keep in mind. Now, one thing to keep in mind as well is that these splines are all going to be perfectly positioned in the exact form that you've designed them. So if you look at these splines, they're still all right there in the same manner that they were created in here. So if we control that spline, we can just grab it, and we could take some of these points and try and move them, or the whole object and try and move it. And I mean, the object will move, but the points are going to just stay where they are. So the best way to handle that problem, or I guess that circumstance, is to create an instance of that spline and then work based off of that instance. So you can rotate it. You can't scale it in this case, but you might be able to drop it under a connect object and scale that. Guess not. Anyways, you can then make that editable if you want. So you can scale that. Or you could just drag it out of your spline controller, and now that spline that you've finished editing is done. And you can type center axis, or I guess axis center, in your Shift-C menu, and just execute and reset the PSR. And what that'll do is it's also under mesh axis center, and what it'll do is it'll take all of the points and put the axis to the center of all of the points. You can set it to -100, and that will allow it to be on the ground when you zero it out. It's a handy little tool. And then you can reset the PSR, and that's going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate the axis 90 degrees as well. And now our spline is done. And we could just drag it right back in, and it'll go exactly to where it was. Or we can drag it out, and then we can reset the PSR. Possibly. I might have bumped too many settings. Anyways, actually no, you can't, because you've changed the points, not the axis. Anyways, that's how that works. So you can find more great training and products at thinkparticle.com. We still sell a lot of products. We have the Octane Studio Kit. We have the Cloud Generator number 2. We have, or I guess the Cloud Field Simulator. The Cloud Generator 1, and this has a Turbulence FD and Pyrocluster version to make clouds really easy. We have the Building Generator, and we have more things coming out. We have TextEdge Pro and Lite. This works all the way from the Studio version to the Lite version, and for the record, this tutorial does work in the Lite version of Cinema 4D as well, because Xpresso is built in. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming, and a lot of good stuff to look forward to. There's a lot of handy scenes and setups that help you work faster, in case you need to make some really handy setups. So anyways, that's where you can find all of our great products, and it's at thinkparticle.com/shop, and you can find a lot more training there. We're almost to 40 tutorials now. And thank you very much for watching. I'm Sam, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.